How are we doing tonight? Almost there. Okay. Well, according to the legacy media, a woo-woo nutrition and health caucus meets at the US Senate late last week. So we're going to break down some of the highlights from this Senate meeting, which I think was really well done. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin put this on. There was Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson. We had Marty McCary, Casey Means, Callie Means, Max Lugavere, a lot of really interesting voices. We're talking about the problems with the American food system and the multiple conflicts of interest in both the pharmaceutical and large food system. In today's show, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I think it's worthy of breaking down this so-called woo-woo caucus. This is, again, according to The Atlantic. These are not my words. I thought it was really interesting. The legacy media, as you might recognize, actually receives quite a lot of funding from big food and big pharma. So it's not surprising when these institutions like to vilify anyone who questions the status quo when it comes to what Americans are eating. And it turns out, I'll just change my screen here. I was actually in Europe last week, and it was quite interesting. I picked up a bag of Oreos, and I didn't see the 4 added coloring agents that you see in the US version of just Oreo cookies. I looked at cereal. I looked at other, staple foods in the ultra-processed American diet. As you know, about 65% of the calories that Americans consume are derived from ultra-processed junk food. And this is causing obesity, rampant diabetes, cardiovascular disease, early onset cancers, dementia, and more. And so that's what this quote-unquote woo-woo caucus, according to The Atlantic, it's interesting. They like to politicize everything, and that's how they're able to create division, is by making everything a partisan issue. Health all of a sudden has to be a partisan issue. Nutrition has to be a partisan issue. And of course, COVID was a partisan issue. You're good. So it's interesting that we can't just have objective conversations anymore. The media likes to make everything political. And so if you don't agree with their stance, well, it's because you're an alt-right fascist, right? And that is just ridiculous, because we have a chronic disease epidemic that's affecting children. It's affecting young adults. There's teenage girls going through menopause at 18, folks. Like, this is really problematic. The prevalence of autism is increasing dramatically, which is terribly sad and really problematic. ADD, ADHD, the number of young people taking their lives, overdosing on drugs, deaths of despair, early onset cancer. I mean, how bad does it need to get in order for the media to actually address the problem? And because they're taking advertising dollars from big food. All you have to do is watch Monday morning news or Sunday morning news on NBC, MSNBC, CNN, CBS, you name it. It's fast food commercials. Every other commercial is Carl's Jr., Kentucky Fried Chicken, or Ozempic, or lipid-lowering medications. I mean, it's insane. So the media likes to politicize everything, and I think that's really disingenuous. And what I want to do is really stick to the facts. As you know, I don't like to really get into politics, but I thought this was really interesting. Instead of showing the doctors that were featured at this Senate roundtable discussion, they featured Donald Trump here to create the illusion that if you support wellness and quote-unquote woo-woo alternative wellness, well, therefore, you are anti-democratic because you support Orange Man, and Orange Man is very bad. But there was no political discussion in this Senate roundtable discussion. This was all about facts and evidence that the American food supply has been tainted and adulterated, and that companies like Nabisco, Kraft, General Mills, they have actually been acquired in the 1980s by tobacco companies. And they have used the same marketing tactics, i.e. the food companies, and their executives have used the same tactics that they used to sell tobacco and to get young teenagers hooked on tobacco products early on, to then sell food products to young children. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a partisan issue. This is not alt-right, QAnon stuff. This is facts based in research, which I will share with you momentarily. But first, friends, I just want to say hello. How we doing? As you know, I get excited about this, and this is just a reminder for me to slow down. We're going to really dive into this. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. Let me know if you can hear and see me okay. That always really helps. We have a new camera here, actually, so hopefully that's a little bit better. But yeah, we're going to dive into some fun research. So again, if you're enjoying the content, just hit that like button. Let me know where you're viewing this from. I always like to know where folks are viewing our videos from. Okay, so it seems that, people are fed up. I mean, all you have to do is go to Europe or go to another country. You don't see the rampant obesity. You don't see all of the chronic health issues. As soon as you land back in America, it's like it's quite obvious, and I'm not trying to fat shame anyone, but it's quite obvious that we have a problem. All you need to do is ask people in Italy or France or Germany or Denmark. They know too. Everyone around them, this is no secret. This is no surprise that our food system has been hijacked by these companies, and they are intentionally making ultra-processed junk food even more addictive and problematic for people. And other countries actually put labels on their foods, or they straight up ban certain ingredients that we should be banning here, because those ingredients, as was discussed in the Senate roundtable discussion, are linked with a myriad of different health issues. And so that was discussed by Vani Hari, that was discussed by Chris Palmer, Casey Means, Callie Means, Marty McCary of Johns Hopkins. These are not alt-right conspiracy theorists whatsoever. These are people that are stating the facts. And so speaking of facts, let's get into this. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that the Grocer Marketing Association, I believe, is the acronym for a group. This is a lobbying group that goes to Washington every year and prevents food companies from being required to put the warnings that other countries have on ultra-processed junk food, especially as it pertains to food that is marketed towards children. Now, that's what we really care about. We care about adults, we care about elderly, but it's really problematic, that we're marketing Capri Sun and Lunchables and promoting those as health-promoting items to children. I think that's really where it makes sense to have the government sort of step in and start to regulate these things, because children are our future. We need to protect our vulnerable. And so let's get into it. This is we did a full deep dive on this. This is really interesting. Nina Teicholz et al. Did an analysis on the recent US Dietary Guidelines. And it turns out that there was a committee in 2020 that met to help you better understand what foods are healthy or unhealthy. And it turns out that 19 of the 20 committee members had financial ties to Big Pharma and Big Food. 19 of 20 members, but it's quite interesting. This wasn't disclosed. In fact, the committee is trying to keep this more, sort of objective and free of conflicts of interest. But Teicholz et al. Went to the Web of Science and found that 19 of the 20 members actually did, in fact, have multiple conflicts of interest with Big Food and Big Pharma. Now, how were they able to do that? Well, it turns out they looked at honoraria for speaking, they looked at research funding, and they looked for consultancy fees, as well as disclosures of conflicts of interest in academic, peer-reviewed academic research. And it turns out that here's the list. The committee member 1 through 19, they didn't want to list the names of the committee members, which I respect. I think that's good. But these people that are creating the guidelines, telling you and your children, your friends and family, your neighbors, your coworkers, what's healthy and what's not, they're very conflicted. Now, we're all a little bit conflicted, but again, when we're creating public health policy, it's best to work with people who aren't conflicted by industry. And so you might wonder, well, how does that affect the dietary guidelines? Well, I mean, that's a really good question. It turns out that low-carb diets are not recommended. Right? Why would that be? There's multiple studies now finding that low-carb diets help with cognitive issues, help with depression, anxiety. They happen to help for epilepsy, treatment-resistant epilepsy, ketogenic diets. This has been used for well over 100 years at this point in time. Even certain cancer applications. What about ameliorating diabetes? Turns out low-carb diets can be pretty effective. But when you have conflicted people creating the guidelines, they're telling you that the only thing that is healthy is a plant-based diet. Now, many of these people, as you might imagine, that are on the Dietary Guidelines Committee have ties to food companies that are creating novel plant-based alternative foods, which, needless to say, a recently published study found comparing beef patties to a soy-based protein meat alternative found that these plant-based foods do not stimulate muscle protein synthesis nearly to the degree that omnivorous foods and animal-sourced foods do. Okay, so we're going to continue to talk about this. I just want to check into the feed, say hello, how we doing? How's everything going? If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. I want to get to your live questions momentarily. And I also want to let you know about a tool that can help support your metabolic health. This is the Berberine Fasting Accelerator by Myoscience. What makes this product unique is berberine has been used for more than 3,000 years in traditional Chinese medicine, as well as Ayurvedic medicine. And there's hundreds of reviews on this product over at Myoscience. It actually works. Berberine is one of the few natural products that you can feel a difference with. When you take it, you can test your blood ketones, you can test your blood glucose. This product helps support metabolic health, and it also may help curb evening food cravings. It's theorized that berberine helps support metabolic health by changing the microbiome in a favorable way and increasing the production of gut hormones, and it might help improve satiety. So if you want to support metabolic health, please go to myoscience.com. Use the code podcast at checkout to save. Okay, so we're going to continue on here and dive into more research. I'm going to pop out the chat. All right. We have Sarah in the house. Sarah says, hey, Mike, you're not fat shaming. I have PCOS from American food. All right. Well, Sarah, it turns out that a low-carb diet actually can help with your condition, and as well as myo-inositol. So consider, along with other things, berberine actually has been studied in that context as well, although it's worth mentioning we can't diagnose, treat, cure, prevent disease here. We're talking about supporting metabolic health. Okay. Sarah also says, I believe it's the same individual, that these junk foods should have warning labels just like cigarettes. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I'm really not a huge fan of the government always intervening in our lives, but because this health crisis is really quite dire here in the US, and I think it's ultimately going to bankrupt our healthcare system and possibly our country. I think it's time that the government steps in a little bit because, as you know, these foods are being heavily marketed to people, and our institutions have been hijacked by both the food companies as well as the pharmaceutical companies, and we need a more sustainable long-term solution. I do, again, always worry about the government stepping in and intervening. The libertarian in me thinks it's better to not have the government controlling too much of our lives. But because these companies can't be trusted and the problem has become so big, no pun intended, we need more grassroots efforts like this so-called woo-woo panel that, in the words of The Atlantic. So yeah, those are my thoughts, but thank you for that. Jim says these recommendations are laughable. Jim, I agree with that. All right. Hello from Maryland. Okay, Ira says, my teens are skinny and they want a small bag of chips every day, and I only let them eat, but I feel bad. Well, so here's the thing. You can make your own sourdough chips at home. You can buy better chip alternatives that don't have industrialized seed oils and, refined sugars and whatever else, as well as the packaging of ultra-processed foods are quite unhealthy. Okay, Michael says, where can I get my fasting insulin tested? LabCorp. LabCorp is great. Quest Diagnostics also does that as well. Okay, Jim. Yeah, these are the words of some reporter from The Atlantic, and so we can dive into that if you'd like. I mean, it's just incredible that the Atlantic is calling people who question. All right, now they make everything political. I mean, everything has to be a partisan issue, right? COVID, masking, food now is partisan. Exercise. If you exercise, you're an alt-right fascist, according to the media. I don't think that, but the media says that. So somehow this caucus became politicized by the media, and somehow Trump got wrapped into this, even though Trump had absolutely nothing to do with this conference, as far as I'm concerned. But it was just a health an assembly of individuals who are well versed in nutrition, health, and particularly metabolic health. And somehow this got dubbed by our legacy media as it became political, which is unfortunate. So let's get to some facts. It's enough to talk about, what the media is or isn't doing or what they're saying, but you come here for facts. And so here's some facts. Cigarette companies bought food companies in the 1980s, between the early 80s and 2001. These companies are R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris, and these companies started to buy. They created Hawaiian Punch, Kool-Aid, Capri Sun, Tang, and beyond. And they eventually sold these brands to other multinational global food corporations and drink corporations and things like that. But they took the tactics that work to make a lot of people addicted or help facilitate the addiction to cigarettes and just sort of transpose that onto ultra-processed junk food. And of course, we know the backlash from that. We have a rise in autoimmunity, depression, obesity, chronic disease, mental illness, and beyond in this company. And so this is not a conspiracy theory. These people have used this, and they use the same playbook. I mean, these are facts. This is published information. Researchers and investigators have dove into this. It's not a conspiracy theory. Here's one such journal here: tobacco industry involvement in children's sugary drink production. So there's that, of course, and then this is actually the study I was mentioning here about the anabolic response. I mentioned this earlier. Beef compared to a soy-based protein burger. Very interesting, finding that even a 40-gram soy protein burger doesn't elicit the same muscle protein synthetic rates compared to a 27-gram beef burger, which more on that later. But that is interesting when, of course, our experts are telling us that, we need to, low-carb diets are off the list. Dairy, full-fat dairy, raw dairy, even though there's all sorts of fat-soluble vitamins and accessory factors that are good for the immune system and stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Well, dairy is off the list, they say, which is quite wild. So, this caucus talked about the conflicts of interest in health and medicine and nutrition. And Nina Teicholz does a phenomenal job in this paper diving into this. And so the major actors here, you do see the American Egg Board, but you also see Nestle, you see Abbott, you see Kraft, you see General Mills, you see all these conglomerate companies and so forth. And all of these individuals that are on the Dietary Advisory Committee, 95% of them are conflicted and have multiple ties to many of these companies that it turns out manufacture and sell and market ultra-processed junk food, which we know to be unhealthy. And so that's the take-home here. That was the take-home from this caucus. Another take-home here was highly processed foods are considered to be addictive. And for each, 10% increase in your calorie consumption of ultra-processed food, that is linked with a linear increase in the incidence and prevalence of chronic disease. The list goes on. And the diseases are not small, insignificant. We're talking cancer, sudden cardiac death, Alzheimer's, dementia, cardiovascular disease, and more. So really problematic. What are your thoughts here? What was your favorite presentation from that so-called woo-woo caucus? I'd be curious, to see what you thought. I mean, I thought many of the talks were really good. Max Lugavere is always great. Jordan Peterson, I thought he could have been a little bit more succinct. Michaela was good. Marty McCary's always amazing. Chris Palmer was good. Casey Means, Callie Means. Jillian Michaels. I thought it was really well done. Vani Hari was awesome. So I want to know what you think. I work for Big Kale. Yeah. Leah says it's literally common sense. I agree. Okay, great question from Iris. Iris says, I'm wondering why I need to pee very often after a meal. Not every time after a meal, but sometimes. I don't know. Could I drink too much apple cider vinegar before a meal? Iris, yeah. So an overactive bladder syndrome can be a symptom of sleep disordered breathing. And so what Iris is alluding to is that she urinates quite frequently and seemingly more than she might expect based upon the amount of fluids that she's drinking. So overactive bladder is actually, especially in women, a symptom of sleep disordered breathing. So I would say try mouth taping. That could be something to consider. Okay. How about we look at food costs and food deserts instead of buying the pills? Yes, we need to do that. How do we go about doing it? I don't know. I don't have the answers. I don't. But I think subsidizing the ingredients that make ultra-processed junk food artificially cheaper than real food is a major part of the problem. Virgin oil chips, JB says, yeah, I mean, so you can make your own chips. You can get virgin olive oil chips. You can do a lot of that. All right. What other questions do we have? Moving back to Europe when I retired, Gen X here, a kid of the 1980s. We had no obese peers during my era. Yeah, that's what I found too. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, we did not have the obesity and chronic disease that we do now. Okay, Sarah says, other things to consider to strengthen the pelvic floor. Yeah, strengthening the pelvic floor, I mean, maybe that would help. I'm not sure about that, but I would consider overactive bladder, and it could be food sensitivities. It could be a lot of different things, so that's something to consider as well. Okay, Casey Means will be on an upcoming Joe Rogan podcast. Awesome, that's good to know. Okay. Urethrin A for mitochondrial health. Have you heard of it? Of course I've heard of it. Is it a miracle? Probably not. I mean, to be honest, if you can't exercise because you're bedridden, try urethrin A. There's many other things that you can take that are much better than that and not as expensive. The best thing for mitochondrial health is to exercise. Hands down. Exercise is a mitochondrial-based therapy. Organize a protest. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'm game. JB says, I have mild pain in my big toe that I think could be gout from doing keto. I eat a lot of meat, so not strict keto, more like carnivore with a side of veg. Any recommendations for this? I don't know. I'm biased. I love ice baths and cold immersion therapy. So that would be something that I personally would consider, but I'm not sure entirely. So I found a lot of benefits to cold baths and cold immersions and things like that. So that's something to consider. In fact, I have some low back issues going on. I don't know what even caused it. I mean, I know it's an injury from college and things like that, but it's doing so much better now with the ice bath. Yes, pray for my state, guys. Western North Carolina is not doing great. I agree. It's really tragic. What has happened in the Carolinas. I feel really bad for y'all, for sure. Tart cherry juice is good for gout, individuals are saying. Great. Well, so I just wanted to hop on and kind of share with you some of this stuff. It's sad that the media has to politicize everything, unfortunately. But I appreciate your likes, your comments, your shares. If there's no other questions, we can part ways, guys, but it's always great to connect with you. I really, really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your likes. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you got some value from this, and definitely check out the so-called woo-woo caucus panel, which was really just American Health, a Second Opinion by Ron Johnson, Senator. A lot of great conversations on that Senate testimony hearing. So it's cool to see that people are really starting to wake up to the fact that our healthcare system and our food system are intertwined and working against the long-term health of the American people. So, guys, appreciate you. Okay, JB says, would you count broccoli in this, Sarah? I eat that daily. Interesting. Cool. Right on. Hi from AZ. After years of low-fat, high-carb, I switched to meat-based. Love that. Cool. Hope more wake up. Yeah, I agree with that as well. All right, guys. We'll catch you all later. Take care.